Where are you watching from? And what time is it right now where you are? He always liked to ask that when telling his story, maybe because it reminded him that somewhere out there was someone listening, nodding along, knowing exactly what it felt like to be pushed too far. He stands on the courthouse steps, the cold autumn air scratching at his cheeks, clutching the manila envelope that reads like a final verdict. Case dismissed. It isn't just about the win. It's about the grin he wears as the HOA board members shuffle out behind him, their lawyer flushed and stammering. They dragged him through 6 months of letters, threats, and meetings over what they called a non-compliant mailbox. A $500 mailbox, the wooden one he picked because it matched the rustic cabin he bought years earlier. And the irony, historians still argue whether petty neighborhood feuds or royal successions have wasted more paper over the centuries. But either way, this case stacked up like the crown jewel of absurdity. It had been calm once, when the HOA was just retirees counting lawnmower stripes. But then Sandra arrived. Sandra Lowe, late 40s, recently divorced, face pinched like she'd bitten into a lemon no one offered. Within 6 months, she crowned herself president because no one else wanted the throne, and almost overnight, she began treating the neighborhood like an army base. She hated his mailbox, said it destroyed the uniform aesthetic. He laughed at the first letter, ignored the second. But when she fined him $500 and gave him 30 days to comply, he knew this wasn't about wood and nails, it was about control. That night he stood in his kitchen with the notice in hand and muttered, "They really don't know who they're dealing with." So he went to the next HOA meeting, sitting in that drafty community lodge with the fake fireplace glow, calmly pointing out half a dozen other mailboxes that didn't match any standard. Sandra never looked up, just shuffled papers like a judge already bored with the case. "This matter has been decided," she said, and within a week he was served papers. Most folks would have folded, replaced the box, maybe grumbled at the unfairness while hammering in the new post. But he dug deeper, into zoning maps, county surveys, and the kind of charter loopholes most board members didn't even know existed. Somewhere between late-night coffee and stacks of dusty plats, he found it. Section 14, Paragraph C, a buried clause that allowed adjoining property owners to purchase or lease unclaimed community-touching strips of land without HOA approval. And there it was on the map, an unclaimed sliver where his cabin lot met the private entrance road. Like stumbling onto buried treasure. Only instead of gold doubloons, it was leverage. Quirky detail. That strip had existed for decades because the original developer accidentally left it unassigned when filing paperwork, the kind of clerical hiccup that can change lives. He moved fast, hiring a surveyor, securing county approval, and within 6 weeks the entrance road's first 10 feet legally belonged to him. He didn't announce it. He just smiled wider each time Sandra's glares passed across his property. That morning on the courthouse steps, the envelope in his hand wasn't just a dismissal notice. It was the prologue to something much bigger, because now he wasn't just the man with the stubborn mailbox. He was the man with the neighborhood's front door. He wakes the next morning at the cabin, coffee steaming in his mug, mist curling off the lake like some old ghost keeping secrets. The image of Sandra's fake smile faltering when she spotted the rolled-up blueprints yesterday still tickles him. It plays in his head like a movie trailer, the kind you watch twice just to savor. He unrolls those plans across his dining table, tracing the lines of a modest gatehouse he intends to raise on that 10-foot strip of land he now owns. Small footprint, massive symbolism. Every car entering or leaving Harbor Lake would have to pass under his arch, and Sandra, queen of conformity, would have to see it daily. It was chess, not checkers, and he'd already skipped 3 moves ahead. Permits, inspections, paperwork. He makes sure it's airtight. His lawyer, Rachel, insists everything go through the county, because if Sandra comes swinging, she'll have to swing against City Hall. 2 weeks later, approval in hand, he orders lumber and books a crew. First person he tells is Tom Jenkins, his neighbor 2 houses down, retired mechanic, grease under his nails, grin wide enough to split his weathered face. They sit in the garage, beers balanced on a workbench between sockets and wrenches, and when he explains the loophole, Tom wheezes with laughter. "So, you own the neighborhood's front door?" "Pretty much. And Sandra can't stop you?" "Not unless she can rewrite county law." Tom nearly falls off his chair. Construction begins, hammering echoes through the pines, and neighbors slow their cars to stare. By 10 a.m., Sandra appears, visor crooked, phone held high like she's filming a crime scene. She demands permits. The foreman calmly points to laminated documents posted by the fence. Her face turns the shade of undercooked lobster. He leans against his truck, sipping coffee, and when she hisses, "This isn't over," he replies, "No, it's just getting started." A joke, sure, but the kind with teeth. Historians still argue whether public humiliation or battlefield defeat wounds the pride deeper. But Sandra is living proof humiliation leaves scars. Days later, deputies show up at dawn. Sandra's called them claiming emergency access is blocked. He shows them the open lane wide enough for a fire truck, hands them the permits, and the deputy nods. Sandra's complaint fizzles like cheap fireworks. But by sunrise the next morning, the gatehouse frame is gone, dismantled piece by piece, lumber stacked neatly as if the saboteurs wanted credit for their craftsmanship. Tom spots him staring at the empty gravel and mutters, "She hit you, didn't she?" He nods. This wasn't random vandalism. This was surgical, deliberate. And Sandra had crossed from petty tyranny into outright crime. But she forgot something. 3 days before the build, he had strapped motion-activated trail cameras to the trees. Black boxes hidden in bark shadows, watching silently. He retrieves the SD card, hands it to the deputy, and an hour later, he's at the station watching night vision footage of Sandra herself in jeans and hoodie, bossing 2 men as they dismantle the gatehouse. One even sports an HOA volunteer badge. He doesn't storm over, doesn't blast it online. Instead, Rachel files a criminal complaint and advises him to stay cool. He stays cool and orders twice the materials, a larger crew, and new blueprints with reinforced stone columns. If Sandra wanted a war, he was building a fortress. The stone columns rise like sentinels at the entrance, cedar beams stretching across, and every car that rolls and has to pass beneath a sign carved, "Welcome to Harbor Lake, private entry." He even bolts a little plaque at the base, "Property of Mike Harper. All rights reserved." Sandra's protests melt into silence after a judge grants his restraining order, especially once the courtroom watches the night vision footage of her tearing down the first frame. It's one of those moments you wish you could frame like art. Her jaw slack, the gavel dropping, Rachel whispering, "Granted," like a magic spell. Sandra leaves red-faced, her own board splintering, whispers chasing her down the hall. But he isn't done. Remember that odd historical tidbit about Roman generals salting the ground of conquered cities? He channels that spirit. He leases the sliver of shoreline leading to the community's precious dock. Overnight, the HOA loses control of its crown jewel amenity. On Lake Day, when families show up with coolers and kids, they're greeted by his wooden sign, "Private property, access by permission only." Most folks sign his cheerful waiver and head to the dock anyway. But Sandra storms down in her wide-brim hat demanding answers. He pulls out the lease document, county seal gleaming. Her jaw drops. "So far," Tom jokes later, "you could have parked a canoe in it." Whispers spread. Neighbors realize their $600 dues are tied to amenities the HOA no longer controls. He starts charging event fees, $250 a pop, for dock access. The HOA board folds quicker than cheap patio chairs, agreeing to pay rather than fight. But Sandra fights with rumors, whispering that he'll start charging individual fishermen. Ironically, the idea appeals to him, so he posts sign-in sheets and sets hours. Reasonable access, after all, is a broad church. He records every name, every time slot, every sunrise fisherman forced to knock on his cabin door. It's petty genius, and Sandra refuses to play along, staying away entirely. Then comes the county tax assessor's letter. With dock access restricted, the HOA's property value is reassessed downward. Translation: less justification for dues. He copies the letter, delivers it to every doorstep like he's Santa Claus in flannel. Driveways buzz with neighbors fuming. The emergency HOA meeting turns into a mutiny. Voices rise, fingers point, and when he flashes the letter and hints at the trail cam footage, Sandra crumbles under her own lies. But he isn't done. He catches her in a grocery store rant, recorder humming in his jacket pocket, her voice admitting she ordered the illegal teardown to set an example. Days later, her own words boom from a neighbor's phone speaker at the board vote. The applause after is thunderous, her exit like a storm cloud finally moving on. Sandra is ousted, Helen the teacher takes her place, Rules relax, fines evaporate. He could stop there, but he doesn't. He pours $23,000 into a towering boathouse and second-story deck, cedar gleaming in the sun, visible from half the shoreline. It becomes part fortress, part monument. Neighbors rent slips for their boats, paying enough to cover his taxes. When Helen later begs his help repairing storm-damaged shoreline, he agrees on two conditions: permanent immunity from HOA interference and a written lease agreement guaranteeing his control. She signs without blinking. He saves their swimming area, and in return earns untouchable autonomy. By the time summer rolls into fall, the neighborhood has shifted. Kids ride bikes past his gate. Neighbors wave. Tom brings over beers to watch the sunset from the deck. And yet, the plaque at the entrance says it all: stand your ground. Respect your neighbors. People slow their cars just to read it. Sandra might still grind her teeth wherever she is, but the community has adapted, even thrived. All over a mailbox, just wood, nails, and stubbornness turned into stone columns and a boathouse monument. Quirky reminder: archaeologists still debate whether the Hanging Gardens of Babylon ever truly existed. But here, the residents of Harbor Lake can point to their own wonder built out of spite and laughter, and they know it's real. And so the story drifts toward quiet. He sits on the top deck one evening, grill smoke curling, lake rippling orange under the sinking sun, Tom's voice chuckling beside him. Hard to believe this started with $500. He laughs, slow and easy, because it ended with him owning peace of mind. The gate, the dock, the view, and a neighborhood that finally learned who not to cross. The breeze softens, cicadas hum, and the water folds into glass as if sealing the whole saga in reflection. You can almost hear the whisper riding on that calm air: stand your ground, choose your battles. And sometimes, the little wooden box at the end of the driveway is the hill worth defending. And now, let the pace soften, let the language stretch long like shadows at dusk. Imagine the lake at night, the boathouse lanterns glowing against the dark water, a gentle sway of docked boats tapping softly like a lullaby. The loud hammers are gone. The shouting meetings and rattling gavels faded into distant echoes, replaced by the sound of crickets and the soft lap of waves. It is in these moments that the whole story, with its wild turns and courtroom drama, dissolves into something quieter, something steady, like embers at the end of a fire. Neighbors who once argued about flower pots or fences now pause at the gate and wave without hesitation. The heavy stone columns no longer a symbol of conflict, but of permanence. A reminder that peace sometimes has to be built brick by brick, word by word, even dollar by stubborn dollar. There is a sweetness to that realization, the kind that settles in your chest like warm tea on a cool night. He leans back on his chair at the deck, the brass plaque catching moonlight, the message plain and steady: stand your ground, respect your neighbors. It isn't triumph that fills him now, but calm. Calm earned through persistence, through patience, through the simple act of refusing to bow when pushed. Out across the lake the last ripples fade, and the stillness carries an unspoken promise that tomorrow will be easier than yesterday. And so, as you listen, let your own breath ease, let your shoulders drop, and hold on to the quiet strength in this story. A mailbox may be small, but the stand behind it can be vast. Sleep on that thought, let it carry you into your night, and may your dreams be calm as water under starlight.